Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the live studios again, here in Wisteria Cottage, Hode Farm, just outside of Folkestone, halfway between Folkestone and, what's the name of that town? Canterbury. Here with Bhakta Matt and with Rati Manjari, who happen to be the two techies that we need to get together to expand our forum to different places in different ways. And here we are together with you out there in cyberspace. Welcome home. We're going to read Srimad-Bhagavatam together, like we do every night. And before we do, we're going to read Srila Sanatana Goswami's blissful, deep offering of love to the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees. O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvadasa Vasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Shri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguru Mad Mahadana Man Nishtaraga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu, saduta dayin atini chochatakara hanamun chagadachin mam premna ritkanta yospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love, which means we should always read the Srimad Bhagavatam out loud with all of our loved ones. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 You're getting the band back together here. Okay, we've reached chapter 9 of the second canto. And if you remember, in the last chapter, Maharaj Parikshit asked a whole lot of questions. And the sum total of those questions shows more knowledge than anybody. He already knows everything, Maharaj Parikshit. And you couldn't ask the kinds of questions that he asked, unless you were very deeply knowledgeable about the subject. So he's not asking for him. He's asking for everyone else, all of us. It's a theater, it's a drama being conducted by Krishna. Yeah. So, and now he's answering the questions by citing the Lord's version, and that's the name of the chapter. when we get questions asked to us, we usually give our version. But those who are actually connected to Krishna, when they're asked questions, they give the Lord's version, given by another devotee at another time, or by the Lord himself. And in this way, we can be sure of what we're hearing that is the truth. Okay, so he's heard the word tapa. Brahma is explaining. Shukadeva Goswami is explaining to Maharaj Parikshit what's going on between Brahma and Narada. And Brahma is about to explain a lot. And he's going to receive the seed of the Bhagavatam in this chapter. Very special chapter. So we're starting with text 9, Canto 2, chapter 9, text 9. The personality of Godhead, being thus very much satisfied with the penance of Lord Brahma, was pleased to manifest his personal abode, Vaikuntha, the supreme planet above all others. This transcendental abode of the Lord is adored by all self-realized persons, freed from all kinds of miseries and fear of illusory existence. Purport. The troubles of penance accepted by Lord Brahma were certainly in the line of devotional service, bhakti. Otherwise, there was no chance that Vaikuntha or Swalokam, the Lord's personal abode, would become visible to Brahmaji. The personal abodes of the Lord, known as Vaikunthas, are neither mythical nor material, as conceived by the impersonalists. But realization of the transcendental abodes of the Lord is possible only through devotional service, and thus the devotees enter into such abodes. There is undoubtedly trouble in executing penance, but the trouble accepted in executing bhakti yoga is transcendental happiness from the very beginning. Whereas the trouble or penance in other processes of self-realization, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, and so on, without any Vaikuntha realization, ends in trouble only and nothing more. There is no profit in beating husks without grain. Similarly, there is no profit in executing troublesome penances for self-realization other than the penances in Bhakti Yoga. Executing Bhakti Yoga is exactly like sitting on a lotus sprouted out of the abdomen of the transcendental personality of Godhead. For Lord Brahma was seated there. Brahmaji was able to please the Lord, and the Lord was also pleased to show Brahmaji his personal abode. Srila Jiva Goswami, in the comments of his Krama Sandarbha, annotation of Srimad-Bhagavatam, cites quotations from the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, Vedic evidence. It is said that Yajnavalkya described the transcendental abode of the Lord to Gargi, and that the abode of the Lord is situated above the highest planet of the universe, namely Brahmaloka. This abode of the Lord, although described in revealed scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad-Bhagavatam, remains only a myth for the less intelligent class of men or the poor fund of knowledge. Herein the word swadrishtavadbi is very significant. One who has actually realized his self realizes the transcendental form of his self. Impersonal realization of the self and the Supreme is not complete because it is just an opposite conception of material personalities. The personality of Godhead and the personalities of devotees of the Lord are all transcendental. they do not have material bodies. The material body is overcast with 5 kinds of miserable conditions, namely ignorance, material conception, attachment, hatred, and absorption. As long as one is overwhelmed by those 5 kinds of miseries, there is no question of entering into the Vaikuntha lokas. The impersonal conception of oneself is just the negation of material personality and is far from the positive existence of personal form. The personal forms of the transcendental abode will be explained in the following verses. Brahmaji also described the highest planet of the Vaikuntha lokas as Goloka Vrindavan, where the Lord resides as a cowherd boy, keeping transcendental Surabhi cows and surrounded by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. Chintamani prakarasat mashu kalpa vriksha laksha vriteshu surabhi abhipalayantam lakshmi sahasra shatasam brahmasevyamanam govinda maripurusham tamaham bhajami. A statement of the Bhagavad Gita. Yad gatva na nivartante taddama paramam mama is confirmed herewith. Paramam means transcendental Brahman. Therefore the abode of your Lord is also Brahman, non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is known as Vaikuntha, and his abode is also known as Vaikuntha. Such Vaikuntha realization and worship can be made possible by transcendental form and senses. Text 10. In that personal abode of the Lord, the material modes of ignorance and passion do not prevail, nor is there any of their influence in goodness. There is no predominance of the influence of time, so what to speak of the illusory external energy? It cannot enter that region. Without discrimination, both the demigods and the demons worship the Lord as devotees. Purport. The kingdom of God, or the atmosphere of the Vaikuntha nature, which is called the Tripad Vibhuti, is 3 times bigger than the material universes, as is described here, as also in the Bhagavad Gita, in a nutshell. This universe contains billions of stars and planets. In one of the billions of such universes, clustered together within the compass of the Mahatattva. And all these millions and billions of universes combined together constitute only 1/4 of the magnitude of the whole creation of the Lord. There is the spiritual sky also. Beyond this sky are the spiritual planets, under the names of Vaikuntha, and all of them constitute 3/4 of the entire creation of the Lord. God's creations are always innumerable. Even the leaves of a tree cannot be counted by a man, nor can the hairs on his head. However, foolish men are puffed up with the idea of becoming God himself, though unable to create a hair of their own bodies. Men may discover so many wonderful vehicles of journey, but even if he reaches the moon by his much advertised spacecraft, he cannot remain there. The sane man, therefore, without being puffed up as if he were the God of the universe, abides by the instructions of the Vedic literatures, the easiest way to acquire transcendental knowledge, or knowledge in transcendence, So let us know through the authority of Srimad-Bhagavatam of the nature and constitution of the transcendental world beyond the material sky. In that sky, the material qualities, namely the modes of ignorance and passion, are completely absent. The mode of ignorance influences a living entity to the habit of lust and hankering. And this means that in the Vaikuntha lokas, the living entities are free from these two things. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Brahma-bhuta stage of life, one becomes free from hankering and lamentation. Therefore, the conclusion is that the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets are all Brahma-bhuta living entities, as distinguished from the mundane creatures who were all compact in hankering and lamentation. In the material world, when one is not in the modes of ignorance and passion, one is said to be situated in the mode of goodness. But goodness in the material world also at times becomes contaminated by touches of the modes of passion and ignorance. In Vaikuntha Loka, however, it is unalloyed goodness only. The whole situation there is one of freedom from the illusory manifestation of the external energy. Although the illusory energy is also part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the illusory energy, I scrolled rather than, although the illusory energy is also part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the illusory energy is differentiated from the Lord. The illusory energy is not, however, false, as claimed by the monist philosophers. The rope accepted as a snake may be an illusion to a particular person, but the rope is a fact, and the snake is also a fact. The illusion of water on the hot desert may be illusion for the ignorant animal searching for water in the desert, but the desert and water are actual facts. Therefore, the material creation of the Lord may be an illusion for the non-devotees, but for a devotee, even the material creation of the Lord is a fact, as the manifestation of his external energy. But this energy of the Lord is not all. The Lord has his internal energy also, which manifests another creation, known as the Vaikuntha Lokas, where there is no ignorance, no passion, no illusion, and no past, present, or future. With a poor fund of knowledge, one may be unable to understand the existence of such things as the Vaikuntha atmosphere, but that does not nullify its existence. That spacecraft cannot reach these planets does not mean that there are no such planets, for they are described in the revealed scriptures. As quoted by Srila Jiva Goswami, we can know from the Narada Pancharatra that the transcendental world, or Vaikuntha atmosphere, is enriched with transcendental qualities. These transcendental qualities, as revealed through the devotional service of the Lord, are distinct from the mundane qualities of ignorance, passion, and goodness. Such qualities are not attainable by the non-devotee class of men. In the Padma Purana, Uttarakanda, it is stated that beyond the 1/4 part of God's creation is the 3/4 manifestation. The marginal line between the material manifestation and the spiritual manifestation is the Viraja river, and beyond the Viraja, which is a transcendental current flowing for the perspiration of the body of the Lord, there is the 3/4 manifestation of God's creation. This part is eternal, everlasting, without deterioration, and unlimited, and it contains the highest perfectional stage of living conditions. In the Sankhya Kaumudi, it is stated that unalloyed goodness, or transcendence, is just opposite to the material modes. All living entities in the transcendental abode eternally associate with the Lord without any break, and there the Lord is the chief and prime entity. In the Agamas, the transcendental abode is described as follows. The Lord's associates there are free to go everywhere within the creation of the Lord, and there is no limit to this creation, particularly in the region of the 3/4 magnitude. Since the nature of that region is unlimited, there is no history of when their association with the Lord began, nor is there an end to it. The conclusion may be drawn that because of the complete absence of the mundane qualities of ignorance and passion in Vaikuntha, there is no question of creation or annihilation. In the material world, everything is created and everything is annihilated. And the duration of life between the creation and the annihilation is temporary. In the transcendental realm, there is no creation and no destruction, and thus the duration of life is eternal, unlimitedly. In other words, everything in the transcendental world is everlasting, full of knowledge and bliss, without deterioration. Since there is no deterioration, there is no past, present, or future in the estimation of time. It is clearly stated in this verse that the influence of time is conspicuous by its absence. The whole material existence is manifested by actions and reactions of elements which make the influence of time prominent in the matter of past, present, and future. There are no such actions and reactions of cause and effects there. So the cycle of birth, growth, existence, transformations, deterioration, and annihilation, the 6 material changes, are not existent there. It is the unalloyed manifestation of the energy of the Lord, without illusion, as experienced here in the material world. The whole Vaikuntha existence proclaims that everyone there is a follower of the Lord. The Lord is the chief leader there, without any competition for leadership. And the leader and the people in general are all followers of the Lord. It is confirmed in the Vedas, therefore, that the Lord is the chief leader and all other living entities are subordinate to Him. For only the Lord satisfies all the needs of all other living entities. Text 11. The inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets are described as having a glowing, sky bluish complexion. Their eyes resemble lotus flowers. Their dress is of yellowish color, and their bodily features are very attractive. They are just the age of growing youths, and they have 4 hands. They are all nicely decorated with pearl necklaces, with ornamental medallions, and they all appear to be effulgent. Purport. The inhabitants in Vaikuntha Loka are all personalities with spiritual bodily features not to be found in the material world. We can find the descriptions in the revealed scriptures, like Srimad-Bhagavatam. Impersonal descriptions of transcendence in the scriptures indicate that the bodily features in Vaikuntha Loka are never to be seen in any part of the universe. As there are different bodily features in different places of a particular planet, or as there are different bodily features between bodies in different planets, similarly, the bodily features of the inhabitants of Vaikuntha Loka are completely different from those in the material universe. For example, the 4 hands are distinct from the 2 hands in this world. Text 12. Some of them are effulgent, like coral and diamonds, in complexion, and have garlands on their heads, blooming like lotus flowers, and some wear earrings. Purport. There are some inhabitants who have attained the liberation of sarupya, or possessing bodily features like those of the personality of Godhead. The Vaidurya diamond is especially meant for the personality of Godhead, but one who achieves the liberation of bodily equality with the Lord is especially favored with such diamonds on his body. Now it's very interesting here that it says There are some inhabitants who have attained the liberation of Sarupya, or possessing bodily features like those of the personality of Godhead. Now in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Srila Sanatana Goswami explains that it's not that all the residents of Vaikuntha have four-armed forms like Vishnu. Those that have attained the Sarupya of who worship that form get that form when they come to Vaikuntha. But other devotees have other forms that they get also by worshipping a particular form of Vishnu in the material world that may be different from that four-armed form. And therefore there are varieties of forms in Vaikuntha. It's not that every single person in Vaikuntha has four-armed form just like Vishnu. Like for instance, some forms of Vishnu are in the form of a sage or an ascetic. And those devotees in the material world who perfect their service to that sage, Kapila or somebody like that, they will get bodies similar to him. And so on. That's the principle. Text 13. The Vaikuntha planets are also surrounded by various airplanes, all glowing and brilliantly situated. These airplanes belong to the great Mahatmas, who are devotees of the Lord. The ladies are as beautiful as lightning because of their celestial complexions, and all these combined together appear just like the sky decorated with both clouds and lightning. Purport. It appears that in the Vaikuntha planets there are also airplanes brilliantly glowing, not like the 747 we just flew on. And they are not with the, anyway, we won't go into details about that. And they're occupied by great devotees of the Lord, with ladies of celestial beauty as brilliant as lightning. As there are airplanes, so there must be different types of carriages like airplanes, but they may not be driven machines, as we have experienced in this world. Because everything is of the same nature, of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, the airplanes and carriages are of the same quality as Brahman. Although there is nothing except Brahman, one should not mistakenly think that there is only void and no variegatedness. Thinking like that is due to a poor fund of knowledge. Otherwise, no one would have such a misconception of voidness in Brahman. As there are airplanes, ladies, and gentlemen, so there must be cities and houses and everything else just suitable to the particular planets. One should not carry the ideas of imperfection from this world to the transcendental world, and not take into consideration the nature of the atmosphere, which is completely free from the influence of time, and so on, as described previously. Text 14. The goddess of fortune, in her transcendental form, is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet, and being moved by the black bees, followers of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure, service to the Lord, along with her constant companions, but is also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. Text 15. I must say that I'm getting a little glimpse by singing the Bhagavatam every night like this. I want you to know, Rati, that that statement that you wrote to me on the Skype the other night, I've repeated quite a few times since. And everyone who hears it has become very inspired, because when it's regular, every night, no matter what, as you said, it becomes real. So here it says, the goddess of fortune, in her transcendental form, is engaged in the loving service of the Lord's lotus feet, and being moved by the black bees, followers of spring, she is not only engaged in variegated pleasure, service to the Lord, along with her constant companions, but also engaged in singing the glories of the Lord's activities. So reading the Bhagavatam like this every single night without stop, after some time, what to speak of you sitting there watching, what we're experiencing is just something else. It is something else. It's it's singing the glories of the Lord's activities. And in that regard, I'd like to read this quote that I wrote. I don't know if I read it last night, but when we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only should one hear and chant the holy name of the Lord as Rama, Krishna, or systematically as the 16 names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one should also read and hear the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad-Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. This primary practice of Bhakti Yoga will cause the seed already sowed in the heart to sprout. And by a regular watering process, as mentioned above, the Bhakti Yoga creeper will begin to grow. By systematic nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent that it will penetrate the coverings of the universe, as we have heard in previous verses. Reach the effulgent sky, the Brahmajyoti, and go farther and farther, and reach the spiritual sky, where there are innumerable spiritual planets called Vaikuntha Lokas. That's also in the second canto, by the way, second chapter, 30th verse. So the chanting of the holy names leads to the hearing of Srimad-Bhagavatam, the glories of the Lord. And together, they will bring us to Vaikuntha, that we're hearing about right now. Text 15. Lord Brahma saw in the Vaikuntha planets the personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the entire devotee community, the Lord of the goddess of fortune, the Lord of all sacrifices, and the Lord of the universe, who is served by the foremost servitors like Nanda, Sunanda, Prabhala, and Arhana, his immediate associates. Purport. When we speak of a king, it is naturally understood that the king is accompanied by his confidential associates, like his secretary, private secretary, aide-de-camp, ministers, and advisors. So also, when we see the Lord, we see him with his different energies, associates, confidential servitors, and so on. So the Supreme Lord, who is the leader of all living entities, the Lord of all devotee sects, the Lord of all opulences, the Lord of sacrifices, and the enjoyer of everything in his entire creation, is not only the Supreme Person, but is also always surrounded by his immediate associates, all engaged in their loving transcendental service to him. Text 16. The personality of Godhead, seen leaning favorably towards his loving servitors, is very slight, intoxicating, and attractive. Appeared to be... Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We'll read that again. I read sight as slight. The personality of Godhead, seen leaning favorably towards his loving servitors, his very sight, intoxicating and attractive, appeared to be very much satisfied. He had a smiling face, decorated with an enchanting reddish hue. He was dressed in yellow robes and wore earrings and a helmet on his head. He had 4 hands, and his chest was marked with the lines of the goddess of fortune. Purport. In the Padma Purana, Uttarakhanda, there is a full description of the Yogapith, or a particular place where the Lord gives audience to his eternal devotees. In that Yogapita, the personifications of religion, knowledge, opulence, and renunciation are all seated at the lotus feet of the Lord. The four Vedas, namely Rik, Sama, Yajur, and Atharva, are present there, personally, to advise the Lord. The 16 energies, headed by Chanda, are all present there. Chanda and Kumuda are the first two doorkeepers. At the middle door are the doorkeepers named Bhadra and Subhadra, and at the last door are Jaya and Vijaya. There are other doorkeepers also named Kumuda, Kumudaksha, Pundarika, Vamana, Sankukarna, Sarvanetra, Samukha, etc. The Lord's palace is well decorated and protected by the above-mentioned doorkeepers. So in South India, where the Vaikuntha atmosphere is prevalent, they have these huge temples, and they have gates, and there's four gates in 7 different walls that surround the temple, and Vaikuntha is similarly constructed, only the dimensions are much different, much greater. So that means 4 times 7, there's 28 gatekeepers actually, altogether. We just heard some of them. Text 17. The Lord was seated on his throne and was surrounded by different energies, namely the 4, the 16, and the 5. And he was endowed with his 6 natural opulences, along with other insignificant energies of the temporary character. But he was the factual Supreme Lord, enjoying his own abode. Purport. The Lord is naturally endowed with his 6 opulences. Specifically, he is the richest, he is the most powerful, he is the most famous, he is the most beautiful, he is the greatest in knowledge, and he is most famous. He is the greatest in knowledge, and he is the greatest renouncer as well. As for his material creative energies, he is served by the 4, namely the principles of Prakriti, Purusha, Mahatattva, and Ego. He is served by the 16, namely the 5 gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, and sky, the 5 perceptive sense organs, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, and the 5 working sense organs, the hands, legs, voice, evacuation outlet, and genitals, and the mind. And he is also served by the 5, which include the sense objects, namely form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. All these 25 items serve the Lord in the material creation, and all of them are personally present in Vaikuntha to serve the Lord there. The significant opulences, numbering 8, the Ashta Siddhis, attained by yogis for temporary overlordship, are also under his control. But he is naturally full with all such powers without any effort, and therefore he is the Supreme Lord. The living being, by severe penance and performance of bodily exercises, can temporarily attain some wonderful power, but that does not make him the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord, by his own potency, is unlimitedly more powerful than any yogi. He is unlimitedly more learned than any jnani. He is unlimitedly richer than any wealthy person. He is unlimitedly more beautiful than any beautiful living being. And he is unlimitedly more charitable than any philanthropist. He is above all. No one is equal to or greater than him, nor can anyone reach his level of perfection in any of the above powers by any amount of penance or yogic demonstrations. The yogis are dependent on his mercy. Out of his immensely charitable disposition, he can award some temporary powers to the yogis because of the yogis' hankering after them. but to his unalloyed devotees who do not want anything from the Lord save and accept him, or his transcendental service, the Lord is so pleased that he gives himself in exchange for unalloyed service. Text 18. Lord Brahma, thus seeing the personality of Godhead in his fullness, was overwhelmed with joy within his heart. His eyes filled with tears of love, and in full transcendental love and ecstasy, he bowed down before the Lord. That is the way of the highest perfection for the living being, Paramahansa, purport. In the beginning of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is stated that this great literature is meant for the Paramahansas, Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam. That is, the Srimad-Bhagavatam is meant for persons completely free from malice. In the conditioned life, the malicious life begins from the top, namely, bearing malice against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Personality of Godhead is an established fact in all the revealed scriptures. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the personal feature of the Supreme Lord is especially mentioned. So much so that the last portion of that great literature has emphatically stressed that one should surrender under the Supreme God, the Personality of Godhead, to be saved from the miseries of life. Unfortunately, persons with impious backgrounds do not believe in the Personality of Godhead, and everyone wants to become God himself without any qualification. This malicious nature of the conditioned soul continues even up to the stage when a person wants to be one with the Lord. And thus even the greatest of the empiric philosophers speculating on becoming one with the Supreme Lord cannot become a Paramahansa because of the malicious mind is there. Because the malicious mind is there. Therefore, the Paramahansa stage of life can be attained only by those who are fixed in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. This Bhakti Yoga begins if a person has the firm conviction that simply discharging devotional service to the Lord in full transcendental love can elevate him to the highest perfectional stage of life. Brahmaji believed in this art of Bhakti Yoga. He believed in the instruction of the Lord to execute tapa. And he discharged the function with great penance, and thus achieved the great success of seeing the Vaikuntha Lokas and the Lord also by personal experience. Rati Manjari the other day sent me a little photos of her sitting on a park bench by herself doing Harinam. That's tapa. But what you get from it is something that you can't get from anything else. And especially when there's just you going out like that, it is intense tapa. No one can reach the abode of the Supreme Lord by any mechanical means of the mind or machine. But one can reach the abode of the Vaikuntha Lokas simply by following the process of Bhakti Yoga. Because the Lord can be realized only through the Bhakti Yoga process. Lord Brahmaji was actually sitting on his lotus seat, and from there, by executing the process of bhakti yoga in great seriousness, he could see the Vaikuntha lokas with all variegatedness, as well as the Lord in person and his associates. Following in the footsteps of Lord Brahma, any person, even up to this day, can attain the same perfection by following the path of the Paramahansa as recommended herein. Lord Chaitanya also approved of this method of self-realization for men in this age. One should first, with all conviction, believe in the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. And without making efforts to realize him by speculative philosophy, one should prefer to hear about him from the Srimad-Bhagavad Gita and later from the text of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. One should hear such discourses from a person, Bhagavatam, and not from the professional man or from the karmi, jnani, or yogi. That is the secret of learning the science. One does not need to be in the renounced order of life. One can remain in his present condition of life, but he must search out the association of a bona fide devotee of the Lord and hear from him the transcendental message of the Lord with faith and conviction. That is the path of the Paramahansa recommended herein. Amongst various holy names of the Lord, he is also called Ajita, or one who can never be conquered by anyone else. Yet he can be conquered by the Paramahansa path, as practically realized and shown by the great spiritual master, Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma has personally recommended this Paramahansa Pantha in his own words as follows. Jnane prayasam udapasya namanta eva jivanti san mukaritam bhavadiya bhartam stane stitak shudikatam tanuvan manobir ye prayasho jita jito pyasitris trilokyam. Lord Brahma said, O my Lord Krishna, a devotee who abandons the path of empiric philosophical speculation aimed at merging in the existence of the Supreme and engages himself in hearing your glories and activities from a bona fide sadhu or saint, and who lives an honest life in the occupational engagement of his social life, can conquer your sympathy and mercy, even though you are ajita, or unconquerable. That is the path of the Paramahansas, which was personally followed by Lord Brahma and later recommended by him for attaining perfect success in life. Text 19. And seeing Brahma present before him, the Lord accepted him as worthy to create living beings, to be controlled as he desired, and thus, being much satisfied with him, the Lord shook hands with Brahma and, slightly smiling, addressed him thus. Purport. The creation of the material world is not blind or accidental. The living entities who are ever conditioned, or nityabada, are thus given a chance for liberation under the guidance of his own representative, like Brahma. The Lord instructs Brahma in Vedic knowledge in order to diffuse this knowledge to the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are forgetful of their relationship with the Lord, and thus a period of creation and the process of dissemination of Vedic knowledge are necessary activities of the Lord. Lord Brahma has a great responsibility in delivering the conditioned souls, and therefore he is very dear to the Lord. Brahma also does his duty very perfectly, not only by generating the living entities, but also by spreading his party for claiming the fallen souls. The party is called the Brahma Sampradaya, and any member of this party, to date, is naturally engaged in claiming the fallen souls back to Godhead, back home. The Lord is very much anxious to get back his parts and parcels. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, no one is more dear than the one who takes the task of reclaiming the fallen souls back to Godhead. There are many renegades from the Brahma Sampradaya whose only business is to make men more forgetful of the Lord and thus entangle them more and more in material existence. Such persons are never dear to the Lord, and the Lord sends them deeper into the darkest region of matter, so that such envious demons may not be able to know the Supreme Lord. Anyone, however, preaching the mission of the Lord in the line of the Brahma Sampradaya is always dear to the Lord, and the Lord, being satisfied with such a preacher of the authorized bhakti called, shakes hand with him in great satisfaction. Text 20. Actually, yeah, perfect. We'll stop there. The Lord will begin tomorrow night to speak. To Brahma. So, we come to our stage of reflection. Anything, there were so many things in these purports. We ask anyone out there in cyberspace who is listening, who wants to, reflect on what they've heard tonight, or inquire, or whatever, please feel free. Anything that's stuck in your mind as being particularly meaningful that you want to have discussed more, or...
I have a question.
Bhakta has a question.
So, in the Vaikuntha planets, we have a different spiritual body depending on, did you say who we follow, or you said a body like a sage, or...
Yeah, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, he describes Vaikuntha Loka as being attainable only by pure devotional service to the Lord. But the Lord has many forms. The Lord appears in all the species of life. And if a person perfects his devotional service to a form of the Lord and becomes very attached to that form, then when he returns to Vaikuntha Loka, he attains a form similar to that form, only it's completely spiritual.
What does it mean getting attached to a form in devotional service? Like, how would I get attached to a form here?
By hearing about the form, theoretically at first, and then with faith, and by associating with the devotees, and gradually coming to a point of attraction and affection and emotional attachment.
So I would know what that form is eventually.
Yeah. Well, we have, Krishna is very kind. We've appeared in this, well, that's a wrong way to put it. We've been attracted to Lord Chaitanya's movement That's not accidental. There are very sincere devotees on this earth who are attracted to Vaikuntha, to Vishnu, to other transcendental forms, Dhanvantari. We go to, we were going, I don't know if I'm going to go again, but we were going to this Ayurvedic kind of hospital or clinic in Coimbatore. In the middle of their campus, they have a little temple, and there's a black stone, Dhanvantari deity, the deity of Krishna, Vishnu expansion, who came into the universe during the churning of the milk ocean. And he was carrying a pot of nectar, and he was also carrying a leech, maybe more than one, two, I think. And they are used for medical purposes. Yeah. And he brought with him the Vedic, Ayurvedic medical. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole cadre or enclave of devotees there that worship him in his form.
And those devotees are attracted
to
like medicine or healing.
Yes, yes.
So naturally they're going to be attracted to that expansion.
Or vice versa, they're attracted to that expansion and they're naturally attracted to the Ayurveda. I mean, that's one possibility. The possibilities are endless. That's just a principle, Okay. That's just a principle. Prabhupada taught us that the soul has a fixed relationship with the Lord, and that doesn't change. There are different opinions about that, but that's the general principle that we should follow, taking from our Acharya, from Srila Prabhupada. Mm-hmm. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I mentioned this a few days ago, I think, in Houston. When I was editing Shivaram Swami's books, he came upon an excerpt from one of Bhaktisiddhanta and Saraswati Thakur's teachings, where he discusses the concept of incidental hearing. This may sound like something different. It's not. It's the same thing that Prabhupada taught us exactly. But when you hear, like we're hearing, we heard the Bhagavad Gita all the way through, now we're hearing the Bhagavatam, we're going to keep going all the way through, then we're going to read Chaitanya Charitamrita all the way through, then we're going to go back to the Bhagavad Gita and we're going to hear it all the way through. And I wish I would have started about 40 years ago doing this, but unfortunately I've only got so many years left. So however many years I have, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And the fact is that as we do this, and chant our rounds under the order of a pure devotee, and follow the regulated principles, and engage in service to spread the movement in this Krishna consciousness movement, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, then gradually, by that hearing process and by the serving and by the association, we begin to get and Prabhupada says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 4, text 34 in the purport, he says that we get a natural, special appreciation for a certain pastime of the Lord, or a certain environment, certain place in the spiritual world. Certain devotees attract us more than others. That's the beginning of advanced devotional service. When our hearts are purified by all this hearing and chanting and taking prasadam, nothing but prasadam, and engaging in devotional life and devotional service, especially by preaching Krishna consciousness and spreading Krishna consciousness, then gradually through this process of hearing sincerely, if we continue to do it this way, this incidental hearing, we hear. Even in the Bhagavatam, we hear about Krishna's pastimes. We already heard something about 1 or 2 or 3 times, something about Krishna's pastimes. And That's how it happens. By the process of hearing, it wakes up the soul. And it's not that everyone is going to be attracted to the same part of Krishna's pastimes as much as others. And if we haven't actually developed that specific attachment to a particular pastime, then we should just continue to hear. And don't try to artificially, in our minds, think, I like this more than that. Now, this is a very delicate point, because it does come into the mind, it does come from the heart, but it's not something that you imagine for something you hear, that this is the highest thing. So then we say, well, I want to be that. It's not a mental conception. You can't think your way into the rasa dance, There's all kinds of protective, ways that Krishna, keeps us from crashing the party, gate crashing. So it's a whole culture, it's a whole process. And all these elements should be there under the instructions of the personalities, the Mahajans. And in our case, Srila Prabhupada, he's the representative of the Mahajans to us. So that's how you become. You first have to surrender, at least with faith. You have to hear, you have to want, you have to begin to want these things. And then rather than jump ahead and try to embarrass yourself and everyone else by acting in a way that's over your stature, over your status. And that also comes as a natural course, in the natural course of advancing in devotional life, because the closer you get to Krishna, the more you see your difference between you and Krishna, and the more your humility becomes real and more intense. So at some stage, the more you become advanced, the less advanced you feel. And that keeps going until, you can feel like everyone else is more advanced than you. And Radharani, who's the topmost devotee, who's teaching us the perfection of devotional service, she thinks everyone else is a devotee except for her. And she is the topmost devotee of Krishna. She's the internal pleasure-giving potency of Krishna. She's not an ordinary living being like us, but she represents the pinnacle of devotional service, the perfection of bhakti yoga. Of Yashoda, So we can't aspire to be Radharani, we can't aspire to be Yashoda or Nanda or, Sridhama or some of the, intimate associates of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. But we can aspire to be their servants. And that's the secret. That's the secret of spiritual life. And it begins by becoming the servant of your spiritual master. That's the first step. Surrender to the spiritual master. Is that something?
Yeah, it's really deep.
Rati, you got something?
Well, I was thinking that it's so amazing that even though these people, devotees, great devotees, there are devotees. How did I write it down? I was reading the other day or hearing that we got our material bodies according to our material desires of our past lifetimes. So we get the material body. So apparently it's the same in the spiritual world, that they get spiritual bodies according to their desire to love and serve that form of the Lord?
No,
Is that true?
no.
How
There's
is
no
it?
birth in the spiritual world.
I would like
You already are in the spiritual world. You're in the spiritual world right now. And you have a spiritual body. It's not that you get a spiritual body. You wake up, just like you wake up from a dream. And you remember who you are. You may be in a dream and you may be thinking you're something else, someone else doing so many things. And when you wake up in the morning, you open your eyes and then you remember who you are. It's just like that.
I was trying to appreciate from my Dr. Frog position how this, how amazing it is that they look like Krishna apparently, or forms of Lord Vishnu, but they don't identify as themselves to be Vishnu.
Oh yes,
And those
yes.
that want to be God or think they already are God, that never works. But those who serve God, they get forms like Him, but they don't think, oh yeah, actually I am Him. I mean, this is just all very exalted, very pure.
It's interesting, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, in the second part, when Gopakumar goes to Vaikuntha, he's sitting in the gateway and he's waiting for the permission to enter. Because the persons, the Vaikuntha devotees who brought him there, they go into the, through the gate and they get permission for him to enter, right? So while he's sitting there waiting for the permission, he sees all these personalities come and go. And each one of them he sees, this is Vishnu, and he bows down and they go, no, I'm not Vishnu, and they plug their ears and they run away, and I'm just the servant of Vishnu, don't call me Vishnu. And so it's like that, what you said, only it's very extreme. If you call, even Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, but if you would, and his devotees could see him for who he was. Not anyone could, because he didn't look like Krishna, and he was acting like a devotee of Krishna. But they knew he was Krishna from their own spiritual realization and also from their learned the knowledge they've gotten from scriptures. And when anyone ever tried to trick him, into hearing that he was Krishna, he would be very upset.
That's not his mood.
No. Yeah, we don't want to put Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the center as the enjoyer, Krishna. And they do that. The Gauranga Nagaris in Bengal, they enact rasa dance, and they act out themselves. And they put a person who's dressed up like Lord Chaitanya in the center, and thereby disturbing the Lord, because he doesn't want to be put in the center like that. He's acting as a devotee of Krishna. So we can learn how to be a perfect devotee of Krishna by following the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya. He wasn't born a sannyasi. Now, let's get back to the point about birth, because there is, a preparation to go there. Yes. And now, it's not clear to me whether it's absolutely required. It may be. I've heard it both ways. You can go directly from here back to Goloka Vrindavan. But Prabhupada told us also that you can go to the place in the material world where Krishna is performing his pastimes. And there you can take birth in Braj, where he is in the particular universe, and get trained by the servants of the devotee that you've worshipped in that mood, in that particular relationship, and get trained fully in the presence of Krishna, and then from there go back to Vaikuntha Loka, or to Goloka Vrindavan.
But they're both. Can I ask one more question?
Yes?
About what we heard, that the spiritual world, it is fully separate from the material world. I mean, no, it's all one. It's all actually spiritual, right? I mean, when you
Well, it's like, you know, they have a high security prison somewhere where we just came. It was Huntsville, right between Dallas and Houston. There's a Huntsville prison, and the prison, when you're inside the prison, it's not that you're not in Huntsville. You're in Huntsville, but you got a whole bunch more rules, you know, that you have to follow. You're forced to follow. So it's like that. The material world is actually within the spiritual world. There's that verse, Matak Paratanam Nanyat Kinchidasti Dhananjaya Mai Sarvamidan Protam Sutre Mani Gana Iva. It means that Krishna says, there's no truth superior to me. Everything rests on me as pearls are strung on a thread. So the material, his effulgence, his light, everything is resting on that light, the effulgence that comes from Krishna, and also from the planets, because everything in the spiritual world is effulgent. But from that spiritual effulgence, everything is resting. The Vaikuntha planets are resting in it, and the cloud, the material elements are like a cloud, you know, in that spiritual sky. So underneath what we see here is the spiritual energy. And it's just like a cloud in the sky, so this material world is just like a cloud in the spiritual sky. And it seems like a big deal, it is a big deal, but you know, the length of time that it lasts isn't very long. To Mahavishnu, it's only one out-breath and one in-breath.
are there suns and moons in the spiritual world?
Yeah, there's everything's there. It's a reflection. It's the original. This is a reflection, and the original is the in Vaikuntha planets.
Also suns and moons.
Yeah.
And days and nights.
Yes.
But then for the sake of
But time is different. Time is different. There's no past, present, and future. So, for instance, because there's no past, present, and future, whenever you see Krishna, it's like the first time. Mm-hmm. A pastime will happen, and then it'll happen again in a sequence of events. But each time it happens, it's like it's the first time. It's fresh. It's ever fresh. Nothing ever gets tiring. Nothing ever gets deteriorated over time. Yeah. No boredom. No restlessness. But there are manifestations of all the different emotions. Sometimes we feel, trauma. Sometimes demons appear, and they're not really demons, but they're there. In the Bhagavatam, there's a description of Keshi comes, and Kaliya he comes, and Krishna doesn't kill them exactly, but he rides them like a circus ride or something, like a,
Is that what?
And it can happen again and again. Like he goes to Mathura and he kills Kamsa, and then he comes back, and then after some time he goes to Mathura again and kills Kamsa, and he comes back.
It's like a fairy ride or something.
It's not it's fairy ride. It's just. I mean, we can't understand it from here, actually, not really, but we can understand something, and try to understand something.
Is that what this sentence refers to in verse 10 in the translation? Without discrimination, both the demigods and the demons worship the Lord as devotees.
Yes.
That's what that refers
Yes.
to. Okay, very nice.
Okay, we're going to call it a night for tonight for the reading. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you for your sangha. And are there any questions out there in cyberspace yet? Nothing. Okay. We'll be here tomorrow night, same place, same station. All glories to the devotees of the Lord. All glories to Srimad-Bhagavatam. All glories to Lord Brahma. And all glories to Narada Muni and Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami and their association. By hearing like this every day, we get to associate with them. We get to know them better. We get to know how to think and feel and will in Krishna consciousness by following in their footsteps. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Thank you.